Hello, friends, and welcome into our weekly update for this week ending Friday, April the 3rd. It is Easter week. I've got Adamo and Jerry alongside of me, Mitch, and we've got a lot to get to for this week. And a lot has happened, guys, this week. And so let's jump right into what happened this past week on Tuesday at the North Carolina General Assembly. Adamo, there was a joint legislative education oversight committee, easy for some to say, not this guy. Tell us what they looked at and what they told the people there in the building.
Yeah, so this was an interesting committee, again, on education oversight. The first topic was math standards, which got most of the debate and the back and forth, which was interesting, but won't be our focus here. They then looked at advanced teacher pay and My Future NC. But the fourth topic would be the one of most interest to us and to our viewers here, which was cell phone usage in schools. Now, this presentation was specifically focused on a survey they did of middle school students. And that's important because one of the first data points was that if you look at the percentage of students who already have smartphones, over 80% of middle school students, and then more than 3/4 of them bring those phones to school. So that means more than 60% of our middle school students in the state are bringing phones to school, which, depending on what you think is happening out there, that might seem low or high. I don't know.
Right.
If it were high school, it definitely seems low. For middle school, maybe it's high. But then it looked at sort of the perception and application of the policies. So we know that the legislature recently passed a bill requiring school boards to have policies restricting to some degree at least use of phones during instructional time. We would advocate for bell to bell, more on that later perhaps. But they found that nearly 20% of the students reported that these policies were not enforced fairly. And nearly 40% of them reported that their classmates were using their phones when they shouldn't. So clearly, whatever the policies are, they're not being applied how the school boards intend, never mind perhaps how the legislature intends. And then only 60% say that the policies are always enforced, whether fairly or not. So that's less than 2/3 think they're applied fairly or say that they're always enforced. So again, these policies just are not universally being applied. And then they kind of looked at when students are using phones during class, which again is the only official restriction that is mandated by the legislative policy. And more than 30% of students reported often, not sometimes, not rarely, often using their phone when bored. And I taught middle school for a year, so I can tell you if a student's threshold is when they're bored, that just means always.
That'd be me all the time, yes.
And then more than 20% often use it when they're lonely. Which we know is a very popular thing in our culture these days, particularly with the effect of social media. And then more than 10% often use it to make plans to see friends. So they're in class, using their phone often to make plans for when to see their friends that may or may not be in the class with them at the time. Other sort of interesting points are that more than 50% say they often or sometimes contact their parents with their phone during class.
Do their parents ever contact them?
So less often. The parents are less often contacting the kids during class than they are contacting their parents. But even from the teacher's perspective, a plurality of teachers think that students are distracted by their own device, and a higher plurality, I think more than 30-40%, think that students are distracted by other students using their phone.
Yeah.
So maybe I'm the good kid that's using my phone, but Jerry, the troublemaker, is on his phone, and now I'm distracted because he's using his phone. And more than 50% of teachers report some level of anxiety tied to their need to enforce or control this policy. What was interesting, and this is something that we're particularly following this year, and we have a podcast coming out from Dr. Horvath, who's doing great work in this area. One of the key takeaways that the Winston Center reported from their report this wave was that more students report being distracted by other students' school-issued device use than other students' phone use. So they're in fact more distracted by the use of ed tech, the tech provided by the school, than by the phones they're bringing.
And find workarounds to get around the firewalls and things like that.
Yeah, more than a third of students are finding workarounds to access things that are supposedly blocked. But even if they're not blocked, the students are more distracted by ed tech than by phones.
Yeah.
So that is why we are supportive of Dr. Horvath's work and his push to move to lessening ed tech, not just personal devices in schools.
Adamo, you know how I know you were a middle school teacher? My worst nightmare. The red pen, ladies and gentlemen. The red pen. The Winston Center is the one that did this study. The study is not over. We don't have the complete data set, but we do have the slides that you just referenced. We will have a link to that slide deck in the comment section or the link section below this video on the email. Jerry, a lot's happened in that meeting and around the building. Tell us what we need to know about upcoming legislative sessions.
Okay. Before, just to follow up on Adamo's, because this is what's fascinating about hearing the committee process. One, to me, it's very encouraging that this soon after the passage of legislation, the legislature wants to know what is in fact happening. A little side note on that, I know this doesn't happen with all laws. We've mentioned it recently with other laws. I go back, way back to the absence education law that was passed. A lot of us were excited about that. It was great. I don't remember a lot of the follow-up. And it's critical because you can pass good laws, pass good policy, but if you don't have this type of follow-up, you know, everybody moves on. So anyway, and I could go on with the interaction with some of the legislators about this, which is interesting. They're going, well, it was a small sample. Please don't call our legislative office about the enforcement because this is a local enforcement. Mm-hmm. The local school systems are the ones to pass the policy and to enforce those. All that to say, I'm glad to hear they are pursuing this, looking at it, trying to say, we passed what we believe to be an important law, and let's be serious about actually implementing it. So good news. And you know those realities as a teacher, Adamo. There are enough challenges. It's just hard to imagine. Back to this is typically what's been happening in the last months, legislative meetings like this without actual votes by the House and Senate, either in the committee or on the floor. But we are approaching the time where I think we're hearing more and more news, encouraging news, that the legislature, when they do come back for the short session, I mean, they are going to come back next week as one of those 4-day set-asides where they technically could come back and vote, but it sounds like the end of the month, end of April, is when, in fact, we will begin to see votes, possibly on the floor or in committees, that will move ahead, especially with things like the state budget.
Yeah, so the budget, possibly a Medicaid rebase, and then maybe even a constitutional amendment on property tax and what that looks like. So we'll have to wait and see. Hopefully it's a great session, and of course you can count on our team to be continually focused on exactly what's happening down at the legislative building and making sure that you are aware of what's going on so that you can do what you need to do regarding your values. All very interesting. Another thing that happened this week, guys, is a major win at the Supreme Court of the United States in Chiles v. Salazar. It's a case out of the state of Colorado in which a lady was a Christian counselor and was helping people, specifically children and minors, with gender dysphoria and confusion. The state passed a law that said that she could not offer anything other than gender-affirming care, or they labeled what she was doing as and I'm
conversion
gender
therapy.
Yes, thank you. Conversion therapy, which just goes to show that forgetting that statement is extremely important
because it's been a misused term.
Absolutely. In fact, in the Supreme Court decision, they drew a distinction between the two and actually sent it back down for the lower courts to decide a little bit on what that's going to look like moving forward. But this case is a landmark case. It was an 8-1 decision. The only one who did not rule in favor of Chiles was Ketanji Brown Jackson, and but even Elena Kagan wrote a majority opinion as well.
Concurring with the majority.
Yes,
she signed on the majority and wrote the concurring opinion.
Yes,
in addition to that.
And they come at it from a slightly different point of view, but there's some equally valid material in her opinion as well. And it really drew a distinction between speech and behavior, what that looks like. But they affirmed her right to be able to counsel anyone for that matter, specifically minors, when it comes to gender dysphoria, making sure that they understand their true identity, where their identity is truly found, and that they don't have to struggle or suffer from the consequences of the transgender ideological movement. That it's been so pervasive, especially in a state like Colorado, where some of these laws have continually been perpetuated. So there's a link to that article that our team has helped put together. You can find that in the section below this video. Jerry?
No, and this law was very, as far as viewpoint discrimination, counselors were faced with fines, possibly losing their license. And this is, to me, a good example of when the court is working the way it should work. I mean, I've often told myself, we don't want liberal or conservative activist judges. That's not their role to make law. Their role is to do what they did here. What does the First Amendment say? How do we apply that to this case? And when you're saying this law will exclude this viewpoint and include this one, that's unconstitutional. And like you say, 8-1 decision. They did allow, the part of the law goes back to that word conversion therapy. Way back in history, there were methods that people agree today were wrong.
Yeah, I think
shock
everybody
therapy and
agrees.
things, physical things.
Right.
But when they came to this and applying the law, it, like I say, to me, it's encouraging when you see the court. You know, it's got to be hard, whatever side you're on particular issues personally, that as a judge, you're not there to say, I don't like the law, I'm going to try to move it in this direction.
Right.
They looked at the law, they looked at what was clear viewpoint discrimination, said, no, this is wrong, this is unconstitutional.
Again, the article mentioning this, along with the case itself, can be found in the link below. Speaking of this idea of making sure that gender-affirming care is addressed, our Raleigh dinner is coming up on May the 14th at the Angus Barn, of course, in Raleigh. And our featured speaker, our keynote speaker this year is an exciting speaker. His name is Andrew Ferguson. He's the chairman of the Federal Trade Commission. You've probably gotten an email about this. He's going to be addressing big tech exploitation of children and minors. He's going to be talking about gender-affirming care and how the FTC is pushing back against that and deeming it an unfair trade practice. And he's also going to be talking about how the FTC can affirm parental rights to protect their children. So to find out more about the Raleigh dinner, again, there's a link in the section below this video. You can go and find out how you can be at the dinner, how you can sponsor the dinner, how you can come and hear the incredible message that Chairman Ferguson of the Federal Trade Commission is going to be offering on May the 14th right here at the Angus Barn in Raleigh. Gentlemen, we're doing this a day early. You're going to see this on Thursday because Friday is Good Friday, and of course this is Holy Week and the bedrock of our faith, the most consequential of holidays, truly holy days, is coming up on Sunday, Resurrection Sunday, Easter, and I'm really excited about it and thankful that our office not only celebrates, but our team is just really dialed in on what it means to celebrate Easter this year.
Amen.
So thank you for joining us today on our weekly update video a day early. We hope that you have a great weekend as you celebrate Good Friday and, of course, Resurrection Sunday this Easter. God bless each and every one of you, and have a great weekend.